Welcome to the Regenerate podcast, exploring the regenerative movement in all aspects of life to revitalize, restore, and re-energize for a better world. I'm your host, Jenna, so stoked to have you here. Let's regenerate together. So today's Regenerate podcast episode is all about Regeneration Canada, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting soil regeneration in order to mitigate climate change, restore biodiversity, improve water cycles, and support a healthy food system. Our guest today is Sarah Barsalou, who is Assistant Director at Regeneration Canada, and we discuss what living soils are and why we should care about them, the regenerative agriculture movement here in Canada, and tons more. So let's get into it. All right, everybody. So welcome to the podcast. As mentioned, we have Sarah Barsalou from Regeneration Canada joining us today and giving her expertise on the regenerative movement with the Living Soil Symposium, among other things. So welcome, Sarah.
Hi, well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So you are currently Assistant Director at Regeneration Canada, which I assume wears many different hats. So would love for you to just tell us a little bit about what you do at Regeneration Canada and a little bit more about what Regeneration Canada is all about.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm Assistant Director at Regeneration Canada, and especially since we are a small team of only 4 right now, it means that I do a bunch of different things to help run the organization. So I'm really lucky to be a part of an amazing team. I love to brag about it because my team is awesome. We really collaborate and work together, make important decisions together. So more specifically, I play an important role in the strategic direction of the organization, in important decision making, whether it's defining our priorities or whether it's working on our internal structure to reflect more regenerative principles as an organization internally, deciding what projects to work on. So all of that. In terms of more specifically my role, so I take care of, developing and managing our network of members and partners across Canada. I help co-organize the Living Soil Symposium in terms of sponsorships and grants and program development. I coordinate our webinar series. I help out with communications and social media, and also, work a lot on putting together different grant proposals and getting money so that we can do the fun things that we do. And finally, because of my legal background, I'm also responsible for drafting internal policies and bylaws, and I often lead, different aspects related to human resources, recruitment and contracts and things like that.
Wow, you are a very busy woman, and it's, sounds like you come from, you mentioned your legal background there, and I always find it interesting to kind of explore, people's journeys and how they got to where they are now. What got you interested in, living soils and regenerative farming?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't have, a background in agriculture. Like I said, I have a legal background. I used to work as a lawyer, but I've always been extremely interested in the way our food is produced and, how it affects our health and the health of our planet. So after working as a lawyer for several years, I, realized that for different reasons, it didn't fit with my personality. And I've always been extremely passionate about cooking, about food, and about knowing where my food came from. My fondest memories as a child were at my grandparents' house, my Italian grandparents' house, tending to the garden and, digging my hands in the soil to pick out carrots. So I've always kind of had that in mind. And I just started to get more and more interested in food security movements. And I actually volunteered at the first Living Soil Symposium in 2017, as I was still working as a lawyer. And my mind was just blown by the concept of soil regeneration, what that means, what regenerative farming is. I didn't realize before that soil was a living thing, and I'm sure we'll get to that after, but I didn't even know that. So it was a huge, aha moment for me. And after that, I worked on different farms. I did some volunteering. I traveled. I worked on a farm in Italy as well. And when I came back, I started part-time with Regeneration Canada in 2018. And so the rest is history. I've been there ever since.
Wow, that's such an amazing, inspiring story. I didn't realize you went over to Italy and got to be on a farm and Wow, that's super, super cool. So yeah, definitely want to dive in a little bit more about why people should, care about living soil or learn about regenerative farming. It's becoming a bit more common now, but Regeneration Canada looks into various ways that it's good for climate change, but also explores these other aspects. So yeah, would love for you to share, why should we care about our soil?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, like we've been saying, we're talking about living soils. The first thing to understand is that soil is a living thing. There's actually more living organisms in a teaspoon of soil than there are humans on the planet. So soil is a very much alive. So just understanding that is a huge step. And regenerative agriculture is really about regenerating soils, about building soil health, and about bringing that life back to the soil, because unfortunately soil has lost a lot of life, and a third of soils are degraded worldwide due to industrial farming and conventional farming. But fortunately, regenerative farming practices can help restore the biodiversity in the soil's ecosystem, allowing it to be more fertile, to increase its resilience to extreme climate events like flooding and drought, and to enhance, the actual nutritional quality of food that is grown in it. So another thing that a lot of people don't realize, and this is the link with climate change, is that of course soil is a huge carbon sink. So regenerative practices help draw down carbon by absorbing it from the atmosphere and storing it into the soil through plants and photosynthesis. So regenerating soil health is really, one of the least known but most promising solution to climate change. And what's another aspect that's really important, and this maybe comes back to your question of broader than soil and living soils, there's a really holistic aspect also to regenerative principles. And one of our ranchers in Manitoba actually defines regenerative agriculture as restoring life in our soil, but also in our ecosystem and in our community. So there's really this holistic way of seeing regenerative farming as an opportunity to drive positive change, to mitigate climate change, but also to feed our communities and to bring our communities together. So yeah, there's throughout all the regenerative principles, there's this holistic approach as well.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. It's like, you really start seeing how everything is interconnected, and, nothing's ever a silo on its own, right? If you look at the environment, we want to take care of the environment, and then you kind of see it, how it impacts our food and then our health, then if it benefits our communities. So, yeah, and it just goes back to the soil and, taking good care of it. So thank you for that. So I actually came across Regeneration Canada about a year and a half ago, when I started my journey into understanding agriculture, the food system, et cetera. So I was really excited because it had, a Canadian focus. I'm Canadian, and most of my research was stemming from the United States. So would love to kind of gain your insights on what sort of movements are happening, here in Canada, or maybe some of the barriers that farmers are facing here in Canada with regard to transitioning to regenerative agriculture.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of great initiatives here in Canada, and a lot of different organizations that are promoting regenerative agriculture, that are promoting soil health, sometimes without necessarily using the term regenerative agriculture. When we're talking about soil health, a lot of the principles and practices are the same. And yeah, simply talking about agriculture as a climate solution as opposed to, a problem. So one initiative specifically that we're really excited to be a part of is Farmers for Climate Solutions. So it's this amazing coalition of farmer-led organizations across Canada that have really united their efforts and their voices in order to change policy in terms of helping farmers mitigate and adapt to climate change. So there aren't very many federal policies currently that help farmers transition to regenerative agriculture, regenerative practices. And some of the recommendations of this coalition of Farmers for Climate Solutions, for example, are, providing incentives for climate-friendly farming. So just, to pay farmers for their services to the ecosystem that benefit all of us, which is not the case right now. So it's hard for them to be incentivized to move in that direction. And another important recommendation also is to help innovative farmers mentor other farmers. So really to encourage peer-to-peer learning between farmers, mentorship and training programs and things like that. So maybe to come back to your question of, what are the obstacles right now for transitioning? All farmers are interested in improving their soils. Every farmer wants to have better soil. It's their livelihood. So that goes without saying that they want to do that, but the barriers to transitioning and implementing regenerative practices are still very important. A lot of farmers don't necessarily know how to change or what direction to go in, and what's lacking is either in terms of education, so in terms of agriculture and agronomy programs, or mentorship and peer-to-peer learning opportunities, like I was saying before, different incentives. We really need to pay farmers for these ecosystem services to incentivize them and support them. And a network. Often farmers that are trying to do things differently are very isolated. A lot of our member farmers that we talk to, they, that are starting to do things differently, they say, all my neighbors think I'm crazy, and they get fingers pointed at them because they're doing things differently, and most people are still doing things in a very conventional manner. So that makes people feel isolated, and it makes it harder for peer-to-peer learning between farmers in the community. So yeah, those are the hurdles, but there is some positive. So recently, during the speech of the throne of the Trudeau government in September, I believe, that Trudeau's government committed to exceeding its 2030 climate goals, and recognized that farmers and ranchers are key partners against the fight to climate change, and committed to supporting their efforts to reduce emissions and build resilience. So just, the fact that they mentioned that was a great step forward. Now, obviously, we're excited to see what that's going to mean, in concrete terms or incentives, but just the fact that they're mentioning it is a huge step forward. So trying to see some positive in that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's some great news. Considering the past couple of years that was never even probably considered on any platform. So that's definitely a huge step forward. For those that maybe aren't too sure, maybe don't have a decent understanding, like how reliant are we in Canada on conventional farming, and how as with our soils, like, are we losing soils pretty rapidly here in Canada as well? Would it be comparable to the United States? Do you have any perspectives there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, unfortunately, the way we've been managing our soils with industrial agriculture all over the world has, severely degraded the health of our soils, and in Canada is no exception. So this comes with, so many different consequences on our soils. So our soils have a reduced capacity to absorb water and are more vulnerable to extreme climate events. That leads to soil erosion as well, and reduced fertility and reduced nutritional quality of foods, and water pollution. So soils are generally degraded in Canada. Again, a more positive thing that we can look at is there seems to be an upward trend in terms of organic soil carbon stocks in the prairies due to an uptake in no-till practices in the last few years. So that seems to be improving, at least in the prairies and the grasslands. Yeah, so on top of soil degradation, agriculture is still a huge contributor to climate change. And in Canada, agriculture is responsible of 12% of greenhouse gas emissions. So yeah, the majority of those emissions come from, high input, high emissions farming practices, synthetic fertilizers and inputs, pesticides, and the reliance on fossil fuels. So there's still a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, definitely a lot of work to do. But I think it's really exciting seeing a bunch of regenerative farms kind of pop up all over the place. I know I've personally been able to connect with a few here in Ontario. I know you guys are located in Quebec. And you guys have been working on a interactive map where, I believe people can kind of connect with regenerative farmers across the country. So would love to hear more about that and kind of your advice for how consumers can connect with local regenerative farmers and, the movement in general.
Yeah, so this is a project that we're really excited about. So we're working on a regenerative farm map of regenerative farms in Canada. So we're currently at the programming stage of the map. We're hoping to launch before the end of the year, so you'll be hearing more from us soon. So the idea is really to create an interactive map of regenerative farms across Canada, and users will be able to search farms in their area and to search by different categories, including products, but also by practice. So different practices used on the farm. So I would say that the map really has like two main objectives. So one of them is really to connect citizens to local farmers in their area to allow them to buy regenerative products, but also to learn more about what regenerative means. What does regenerative farming means, to put a face on the regenerative movement, to see what these farmers are actually doing and how it's regenerating their soils. So there's definitely one goal, which is to link consumers and citizens to local regenerative farms. But then there's also a second goal when we realize how important the need is there, and it's to connect farmers. So again, coming back to that peer-to-peer learning. So we realize how important that is, and we spoke to a lot of farmers about our map, and about their needs on being on this sort of map. And a lot of them said, I want to be connected to other farmers in the area that are doing the same sort of thing, and to learn from them. So the idea is really to connect farmers to each other, to be able to learn off of each other, and yeah, facilitate those conversations and that networking between farmers.
Wow, that's so powerful, and I definitely look forward to seeing that come to life by the end of the year, and following along. So the next thing I want to talk about, which is a huge accomplishment of Regeneration Canada, is the Living Soil Symposium. So I have a couple questions, but let's just start with what is the Living Soil Symposium? How long has it been around, and your involvement with it?
Sure. So the Living Soil Symposium has been around since 2017. So it was really the first event that launched Regeneration Canada. So Regeneration Canada was actually built after the first Living Soil Symposium to kind of keep the momentum going and to build a movement around the event. So the idea around the first symposium was really to organize an event to talk about soil health, because as you mentioned before, there's a lot going on in the States already in terms of regenerative agriculture and regenerating soils, but nothing was really happening yet in Canada. So the idea was to organize this event to kind of get people together to start talking about soil health. And the event was a great success. It was here in Montreal at Concordia University, and there were about 400 people that showed up, which is great for a first event. And given there was such a momentum to keep these conversations going, that's how Regeneration Canada was created after the first Living Soil Symposium. So we then had a symposium in 2019 that was also in Montreal in person. And so that was an incredible event. There were 500 people that joined us. And this experience was just amazing. It was our last in-person event because, well, it was supposed to be in person in 2020 as well, but we had to cancel the week before, actually, due to the pandemic, and we ended up turning things online. So basically, the Living Soil Symposium is an event really to gather change makers to talk about different topics related to soil health and soil regeneration and different regenerative principles. So this can be reflected, through our program. We really believe that the path to regeneration is a collective one, and that everyone has a role to play. So, we're talking about regenerating soils, but also regenerating our relationships between each other and to the land. So it's really important for us that, we have a program that includes more technical, and specific regenerative principles and farming practices with farmer experts, and to have, topics that can relate to scientists and students and agronomists, and so all the different stakeholder groups. But we also want to make sure that we have conversations also around how an organization can be regenerative, or Indigenous views on our relationship to land and why it needs healing. So we really try to have an approach that is multi-stakeholder, that really includes everybody in the conversation, but that is also multidisciplinary, that includes all sorts of different topics related to regeneration.
Very cool. Yeah, I had the opportunity to attend online, and I was very impressed with how you managed to transition such a large conference online in a matter of a few weeks, maybe less. So definitely very impressed. But I know the previous years when you are running, an event in person, it was really important to Regeneration Canada to kind of build it out with integrity and have all these different, being mindful of your carbon footprint, where your food was coming from for the event. So from, I guess, a planning perspective, would love to kind of know how you guys go about ensuring you meet kind of the organization's values when putting together such a large scale event.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, in terms of our carbon footprint, so there's different measures that we use to reduce our carbon footprint, by including, for example, compostable plates and utensils and cups, and by not allowing any plastic water bottles on site. So measures like that. But we also analyze our carbon footprint by asking all participants and speakers to let us know what their method of transportation is and to tell us how many kilometers they've traveled to be to the event in person. So we really calculate the carbon footprint based on that. And then after we offset our carbon footprint with one of our partners, who's called Arbre Evolution, with a soil carbon sequestration project. So we did that for the one in 2017 as well as 2019, so the two in-person events. And so that's in terms of our carbon footprint. And yeah, as you said, for food also, so our last symposium, we had 70% local and organic food, which is very difficult in March. So we're pretty happy with that result. And we were actually able to get some, beef from one of our regenerative farmers. So get our network involved in the food and in the catering as well. So that's another way that we try to include those measures.
Wow. Yeah, that's so inspiring. I remember just learning about some of those tidbits, and I just thought that was, we definitely need more people keeping those things in mind when they're planning these, large scale events and bringing a lot of people to town for various things. So definitely super happy that you could highlight some of the stuff that you're doing there. So I guess you haven't quite talked about, your team. You guys are actually not that big of an organization, but you guys have achieved so much. So would love to just hear more about kind of who else is involved with Regeneration Canada, and what's happening next for the organization.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Like maybe I realize I haven't said, who we are really, generally and what we do. So yeah, Regeneration Canada it's a nonprofit organization really dedicated to promoting regenerative agriculture and land management in order to mitigate climate change, restore biodiversity, improve water cycles, and feed the world healthy food. So that's really, our goal and our mission. So within the team, yeah, we all come from different backgrounds as well. So we have Gabrielle Bastien, who is the founder and executive director. So she has a background in marketing, but also in environmental management from a school affiliated to Harvard. So she studied in the States before starting Regeneration Canada in 2017. We have Antonius Petro also, who is our scientific director. So he's currently doing a master's in soil science. So he, knows all the nitty gritty science stuff. And we have Jael, who is our communications coordinator. So who has a master's in communications. So there's 4 of us now, but we're actually hiring 2 new people. So we're expanding. So in a couple of weeks, we'll be a team of 6. So we're really excited about that as well. We'll have somebody that's going to be helping us with the map and somebody that's going to be helping us also coordinate events. So that's kind of what's next for us. And to come back to Regeneration Canada and what we do in our activities. So, generally speaking, we're really trying to create spaces where different diversity of stakeholders, like I was saying before, we really have a multi-stakeholder approach. So, farmers and ranchers and land planners, as well as scientists, agronomists, businesses and nonprofit organizations, but also policymakers and citizens in the general public. So we're trying to create spaces where everybody can share and learn about what role they can play within the regenerative movement. So some of our main activities include the Living Soil Symposium, like we already mentioned. which, really the idea is to gather hundreds of people to talk about regenerative agriculture. At our last Living Soil Symposium, actually, that ended up being online, we were 800 people at the event, so that's really exciting. So some of our other activities are also educational activities through workshops and webinars, also on different topics related to soil regeneration. For example, we have a webinar this week on grazing, on different farmers and ranchers that are grazing regeneratively across Canada. But we also have a webinar in 2 weeks on Indigenous wild rice in Ontario. So we really have a variety of different topics. We had one on policy as well not that long ago. So those are for our webinars. Another important thing that we're doing is building a network across Canada, and this also fits with our MAP project, but we're developing a network of members and partners across Canada. So we're now at 300 members across the country, and again, it's not only farmers. Some of our, like, just for an example, one of our members will be a bison rancher in Manitoba, and another member will be a student in Montreal that has a balcony garden. So it's really a wide range of members that are interested in regeneration. And then finally, I'd say that we also have a really important focus on communications, which is, really our goal of spreading awareness on soil regeneration and what that means, and the potential it has to mitigate climate change, and to really showcase how farmers can be part of the solution and their different stories. So that's overall the activities that we're mainly focused on.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. And I'll definitely, we'll chat quickly at the end about how people can connect with Regeneration Canada, and I'll include it in the show notes as well. But I always like to, provide some advice to the listeners from your perspective on how they can integrate, values of regeneration in their life, or, become more involved in regenerative agriculture. So what would be your advice for, people listening in today?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I think I would start by saying something more general, in the sense that regeneration can apply to so many different aspects of life, and it's really about leaving something better off than you found it. So I think, first of all, just being aware of that is the biggest advice I would give, towards leading a more regenerative life. And in terms of, encouraging regenerative farming, we'll definitely, trying to source as much as possible from local regenerative farms, which I know can be difficult now. Everyone's always asking us how to do that, and that's why we created the map. So soon you'll be able to find your local farm on the map. And also just, trying to be a part of initiatives that help regenerate soil. So, whether it's being a part of your community farm, or, urban agriculture initiatives, or, having a garden in your own backyard that's regenerative. There are so many principles that can apply to, no matter how much space you have in your backyard. So, that's the advice that I would give, is just see, what role can you play, and how can that apply to your life?
Yeah, for sure. And every little step counts, and you don't have to have a massive yard, or even a yard at all. You can, start some, just some sprouts in your house or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And or check out one of your webinars, like, just chime in and try and learn more, for sure. So that's definitely great advice. So then up next, where can we learn more about Regeneration Canada?
Sure. So there's our website, regenerationcanada.org. So you can find all of our information there. I'd invite you to sign up to our newsletter, or to become a member, to stay in the loop and, hear about all our activities and our webinars and everything that's going on. We're also on social media, so we're very active on Facebook and Instagram especially. So I'd invite you to go check that out as well.
Amazing. Well, I definitely encourage everyone listening here to check out Regeneration Canada. And if you ever do get the chance to go to the Living Soil Symposium, I imagine it could potentially be online again next year, but it's definitely worth your time. You'll learn tons. And I just want to thank Sarah for joining me today on the podcast. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I've already learned so much more than I thought I would. So thank you so much for joining us today.
It was great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Jenna.
All right. Well, I will end us there. And again, thanks everyone for hopping on the podcast today, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks for joining us on the ReGenerate podcast. If you're interested in checking out more of our content, please subscribe to the channel. You can also visit us on YouTube at Regenerate Co. You can send us an email, regenerateco@gmail.com. And if you're interested in connecting with me, Jenna, the host, you can find me on Instagram at Jenna Thornburg. So thanks for joining us.